Hello, and welcome to ISI Insiders, the flagship podcast of extroverted introverts, or introverted extroverts. Because here we get a chance to go inside of ISI, that is the Information Sciences Institute, to meet some ISI insiders, folks from across the Institute, in order to better understand their what, their how, and their why. That is what they're doing, how they came to be doing it, and why. With their ability to go and do anything else, why are they here working on this right now? Hi, I'm Adam Russell. I'm the director of the AI division at University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute, or ISI, and I'm your podcast host. I'm serving as your virtual guide as we talk to some of these ISI insiders, all to test my working hypothesis that by better understanding and humanizing the people who are doing the actual work that we hear about in the media, we might get a better sense of where things may be headed, because these are the folks who are helping those things head in that direction. Or at least maybe we get a better sense of where these folks think we should be headed and how we might get there. So my guest today is John Heidemann. John is the chief scientist for the Network and Cybersecurity Division of USC's ISI, and to my great delight, is also a research professor at USC in computer science. Well, you like this because as a social scientist, I like to argue with computer scientists about which is least of a science. At ISI, he leads the very cleverly named ANT lab, the Analysis of Network Traffic Lab, developing privacy-aware methods to measure the internet and improve network reliability, security, protocols, and critical services. He's a senior member of ACM and a fellow of IEEE, which I now know is not pronounced I. John, welcome to ISI Insiders.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, let's hope you continue to feel that way, because I want to start off with two largely unfair questions. The first is, what do you mean by measuring the internet? I also want you, this is the unfair part, I want you to go back in time and talk to your 14-year-old self about what that means and how you came to be doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we all use the internet. We're using the internet right now to record this. It's part of our daily lives. My group is very interested in what can we understand about this thing that we depend upon. And so we want to measure it, just like we take censuses of the United States to determine number of congresspeople and stuff. We want to take censuses of the internet to figure out how big the internet is. In fact, maybe 15 years ago, we asked that question: how big is the internet? How many computers? And nobody really knew. And so my colleague Yuri Prudkin developed the first census of the internet, where he literally polls every IPv4 address. So you may have seen IP addresses like 10.0.0.1 at your home router. We start at 0.0.0.0 and go all the way to 255.255.255.255, which is all of them, 2 to the 32 addresses. And because computers are so fast, a single computer can do that quite quickly these days. And so we took the first census of the internet, and we've been doing that for the last 20 years or so. And we've taken it a lot further from there because, after we proved you can scan the internet like that, the interesting question was, well, what does this data mean, and what can we figure out from it? And we've used it in a lot of different ways.
Okay, so your 14-year-old self, let's presume, tracks in terms of what the internet is. But why is it important? Why are we spending our time, says your 14-year-old self, doing that?
Right. I mean, I think anything that's important to us, we should measure, because if we can't measure it, we can't make it better. We can't know how bad it is. We can't know where there are problems. And so one of the things we've done, once we realized we could scan the whole thing, is we realized, oh, if you scan the whole thing very rapidly, you can tell when things that used to be there went away. And so we built what's called an internet outage detection system, where we scan 5 million networks every 11 minutes. And we've been doing this since 2013, I think, 2014. And so when we see things like the country of Bangladesh had a change of government in July, and the change of government occurred because they had civil unrest, because they passed a very unpopular law, and people were very grumpy with them. For 5 days in the process, they actually shut down their whole internet as the government tried to control and suppress the riots. And this was a big concern. I have some Bangladeshi students who would like to know how their families are doing. And so we were able to see that in our internet detection system. And so that's one example of the kind of event that we'd like to see that is visible on the internet. And just to finish the story, after 5 days, they brought the internet back, because obviously It's economically crippling to shut down the internet in any major country these days. But 2 weeks later, after continued protests, they actually had to change the government. And so shutting down the internet is not enough, at least in that instance, to control what people are thinking.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So I think you made a compelling argument as to why we need to be able to measure it. Why do we measure it at ISI?
We got started measuring the internet as part of a long-term Department of Homeland Security effort, which was looking at ways to build cybersecurity relevant data sets. And so understanding outages and censorship, we were also, I talked about Bangladesh and the government interference with the internet. Another example of the events that we see is every time a hurricane sweeps through the United States, people lose power. And when people lose power at home, their home routers turn off. And when their home routers turn off, we can see that because that's part of the internet. So we've actually worked with the Federal Communications Commission for several years. We did a pilot program as part of this DHS effort to investigate if our data collection could complement the FCC's current disaster reporting systems, because the FCC is mandated by Congress to report on the status of the US telephone network to the executive. And the way they do this is telephone companies submit notes saying how bad things happen, when outages happened.
Right.
But if we can measure the same thing every 11 minutes in much more detail, I mean, it's really a game changer for what kind of information they have. And so that was some of DHS's motivation for supporting our work.
So if I draw a parallel, it's a bit like seeing your doctor once a year, getting your blood tested once, versus being able to do it on almost a daily basis.
Yeah, or for people with diabetes, right?
Right.
Taking
Right.
your blood sugar at your doctor's office is very different from having a continuous monitor that can directly tell you, oh, you need insulin now.
I should ask, as the director of the AI division, how do you think AI is going to change the internet and the things you're discussing here? And that's an impossible question, not just unfair, but impossible.
I mean, I think one of the scary things is the amount of AI generated content that's appearing that is somewhat indistinguishable from human content in our social media feeds. And in particular, the risk of training on AI content and then spiraling into some kind of death spiral of degenerate learning. That's a huge risk and change that we need to wrestle with.
Right.
The other thing, though, is even as a networking person, there's a lot to learn from AI, and we use some AI algorithms at the core of what we do. So I talked about measuring outages. You always have to make a decision. How many probes do I send? And how confident am I that the network is down? Or maybe the network's not down. Maybe you just closed your laptop, and so your laptop is no longer responding, right? And so the algorithm behind our outage detection actually uses Bayesian inference to reach conclusions. And that gives us a very nice mathematical framework that lets us have a belief in the status of the network that we're probing, and that lets us factor in each new observation we make into that belief so that we're able to make informed decisions about how many probes we need to send before getting confidence in our conclusion.
Right. Yeah. And what you called Bayesian inference, right? It's just this notion that you have some belief of the state of the world, and by getting more data, you can update that belief.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and the key insight that we took from AI is this very specific mathematical model about how much you change your belief in response to each feedback. Because it's very easy to make a basic statistical model, right? Oh, I lost 80% of my packets, therefore it must be bad. But I think what's much more profound is when you can say, oh, I've had a string of losses in a row. That's evidence that suggests the network is no longer reachable.
Wouldn't it would be nice if we were more Bayesian, I think, in so many cases. Many cases. But let me ask you then, stepping back a little bit, what are you most optimistic about coming on in the future in terms of the reason why you're doing this work, things you care about, but also what do you worry most about?
I mean, I think I've been doing networking since the turn of the century, and we've seen a couple of internet bubbles and tremendous growth in the internet. And, you can't not be impressed by the opportunity that's created billions of dollars of wealth, search engines that search the entire web in less than a second. I mean, think about the technology that it takes to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that technology was engineering. I'm sorry, was networking, right? Google can only search the web because they have a copy of the entire web in memory, and they have the software that lets them fan it out across 10,000 machines just for you, just so
Right.
you can find about cat videos. So that's optimistic. The pessimistic side, I mean, privacy is a challenge. I think some of the negative effects of social media and its ability to amplify negative behavior is a real challenge. And as an old person, I can remember the optimism in the 90s when, oh, the internet will be great. We don't need laws because it's just beyond all that. And we don't need it'll all just be perfect free speech and all this. Unfortunately, it turns out perfect free speech gives a lot of very loud and negative voices a pretty big microphone. It will be interesting to consider how we continue to wrestle with that and manage that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair observation. One of my favorite XKCD cartoons, I'm sure you've seen it, is the one where someone comes back, welcome to 1991, so you're from 2021, aren't you? What's the future like? He says, well, we passed a federal law to combat laser attacks on airplanes, TV shows where robots battle, cordless phones are longer range now. Oh, and it's really easy to send news stories to your friends. And the person says, wow, that's amazing. He says, now try to guess which of these things turns out to be important. He says, it's not the lasers. Yeah, it's not the lasers. If you could go, let's say you stay right where you are, don't go back in time, but you could bring anyone out of time or living now to have dinner with them, to ask them some questions about sort of what do we do now? Or how should we think about this? Who are you having dinner with?
You know, maybe it's an easy answer. Alan Turing was a brilliant, brilliant man who was taken from us sooner than he should have been. And he was so far out in front of everybody else. I mean, it just boggles the mind. I cited his 1956 paper now 15 years ago when I was building sensor networks because it was still relevant. And think about the scope that his research ranged over in his lifetime. It would be fascinating to see his take on where we are in 2024.
Man.
He had early hand waves about AI. So back when a computer had 64 kilobytes of memory, and that was a lot. I do think I wish I could have his vision and his ability to see into the future because I'm sure there are things that he could imagine that we're not able to build today, but that we might be able to build in 10 or 20 years.
I think that yeah, I think that's right. My instinct is as well. He would see the sort of seeds or the trends, and he would see
Exactly.
how these things would interplay, and probably have a good idea. Well, maybe we can use AI for that. That'll be
Yes.
that'll be good. Uh, what do you think is the biggest misconception? I usually ask this of people about artificial intelligence, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the biggest misconception, meaning either the most widespread or the most perhaps problematic misconception around the internet?
One thing that it's easy for the lay person to get confused about is what is the internet? And thinking, oh, the internet means Facebook or the internet
Mm,
means TikTok. Or in fact, I think maybe we've even moved beyond that. Maybe the internet is not TikTok. Maybe TikTok is now its own thing, right? But it is important if you want to think a little bit deeper to understand that there are different layers of the internet. I was talking about outage detection earlier. We do outage detection at the network layer. We ask, can network packets get to your home? But for better or worse, people who want to interfere with the internet have many layers they can interfere with. People can let all the packets go through, but they can stop it so that you can't resolve names, so that you can't get to google.com. You could get to google.com if you could figure out where it was, but you can't ask the domain name system where google.com is. Or people would interfere maybe not with the names, but with the content. And so, because people are very creative and because people who want to impede communication have a lot of money frequently, they interfere at a lot of different levels. And I think one place where I would encourage people to try to be a little more thoughtful when they talk about internet censorship or those kind of things is to think about where the different levels where that play takes place. And in fact, if you'll indulge me, one more level is not just blocking access to Facebook, but getting into Facebook and polluting the Facebook feeds with a bunch of data, which is something that multiple nation states have done, and also something that advertisers do, right? Their job is to get in your face. While not technically censorship, that can have the same effect as replacing useful content with nonsense.
I think that is a really important thing for people to realize, that there are multiple levels, and almost in some cases, again, drawing the parallel with a biological system or our bodies, like there are lots of ways for people to get sick. Yeah. And lots of things that can make you sick. To your point, being able to control the shape of how information travels can itself, affect the degree to which the message is received and how it's impacted and who's impacted, not just the message itself. I don't mean to get too philosophical on you, but I think, yeah, you're right. There are lots of ways to censor or at least shape speech and information in this space. Okay, so when I interview people in AI, I ask them, probably the hardest question so far is, do you have a good AI joke? It's remarkable how often that we do not. I will offer you the chance to tell a
A
good
good
joke.
networking joke?
It could be a networking, could be an internet joke, could be AI. You never know. I'm willing to, ask aliens outside of our orbit.
So, I don't have a pithy joke off the cuff.
That's
I
all right.
will say, though, you brought up XKCD earlier. So the best XKCD comics are the ones that really hit at an underlying truth. And one of the really classic ones is the comic that shows this pyramid of software where each component is layered on top of the other. And there's this rickety little timber at the bottom with a pointer to it saying that's maintained by the guy in Nebraska, by the one developer in Nebraska. And you may remember the panic over the XZ encryption library, which happens this year, maybe 6 or 9 months ago, where there was presumably a nation state that worked for 2 years to try to inject code into that library with a very sophisticated attack. But I think that really shows the truth behind, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself. First, amazing thing that open source has worked over the last 40 years and brought us the internet that we have, because we would have a very different internet if it was all built on proprietary stuff.
Right.
But the risk is that it is sometimes precarious. And so the joke is we can all imagine that picture in our head and realize that there's a lot of truth behind that. My too long joke, or a
No,
too
it's
long anecdote.
absolutely reasonable, especially since I surprised you with
Yeah.
it. But if nothing else, you're going to make people in AI feel better. For that. All right. Well, we're coming up on time, John. I thank you very much for your time here. Is there anything else you wanted to cover while we're here?
I think there's one bit I'd like to add, which is I need to stick in the plug, which is that if you're interested in seeing our outage data, we have a public website. It's outage.ant.isi.edu. So ant, A-N-T, outage, you'll have to spell yourself. But that's our near real-time feed of our outage detection system. And every day you can find out, there's some state in the United States that has some kind of problem. There are little problems all the time.
Very cool. Again, one of many things that have come through ISI, from ISI, both with government funding, but also, frankly, public goods, which I think is really important. My own unofficial tagline at ISI is doing everything we can to help realize the best of all possible worlds. There are many in front of us. It's hard to see how we get to the best of all possible worlds without the internet, without networks, which is our secret sauce as humans, is that we can build these things. Yeah. So thank you on behalf of the species for being in the fight and hopefully making sure those networks end well for us.
I hope I can do them proud. So thank you for the kind words and
Thanks, John.
and the interesting chat.
Good to talk to you. All right. If you enjoy these short podcasts, please do what really only you can do, or at least we only want you to do because you're the one listening. Please rate us, score us, evaluate us, grade us, share us with your friends, maybe your enemies. Go ahead and subscribe. Send us feedback. Offer up brave questions. Please send us good network AI jokes of some sort. And of course, just keep listening and learning. And then join us again for another future episode of ISI Insiders, where we'll keep exploring, keep learning, keep humanizing this world to help us navigate our way through the weird future we're facing, trying to do what humans really do best when they face these kinds of challenges, working together as if all our lives depend on each other, because they do. So for now, for the future, fight on.